What I don't hear people talking about very much is the culture and the expectation that we're going to have less in the future. And we need to have less, and we need to consume less, because we have a junk economy. And it's not just junk food, it's not just junk plastic, there's just junk everywhere. We're all marketed junk all day long that keeps this booming economy growing all the time.
Hey everyone, it's Johnny here. The tagline for this show is Enlightened Brand Strategy. So what does that mean? Enlightened is the pathway, it's a direction for positive change and growth. Brand is an identity within a perceived space, and strategy is a game plan. So it's building an identity and building a community for positive change and growth. I had the opportunity to speak to an inspiring person who does exactly that. It's Hugo Tagholm. Hugo is the Chief Executive for Surfers Against Sewage. They're a marine conservation charity, or an ocean conservation charity. They fight against plastic pollution, sewage pollution. They are right at the forefront and campaigning to protect our seas and our rivers and our oceans and our wet spaces. Hugo is truly inspirational. He's been doing this for years and years and years. He's been campaigning for a long time, and he's right there in the thick of it, really fighting the cause, his cause and the cause around the world to try and protect our oceans and our seas. So we spoke about lots of different things. We talked about his life in Cornwall. We talked about the work that he does. But we also spoke quite a lot about how can people contribute? How can people help? How can businesses think differently about their contribution to zero waste or pollution, to using less single-use plastics, and really working hard to make a difference. So here's the conversation. This is Hugo Tagholm, the Chief Executive of Surfers Against Sewage. Enjoy. Hugo, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm a bit tired. I've had a sort of a week of running around to different events, which has been inspirational. But I've just been on a lot of trains over the last sort of 72 hours.
And you're based in Cornwall? Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm in Cornwall, back in Cornwall now. I'm based in Cornwall. Our office is up on the north coast of Cornwall in a village called St Agnes. It has been for many, many years. And it overlooks the beautiful Atlantic, the environment that we're here to champion, the ocean, the one global ocean that connects everyone in the world and is vital to everyone in the world. So I'm probably one of the few CEOs who has the privilege of looking out across the environment that they're there to help preserve and restore.
Yeah, amazing. Well, it's beautiful blue skies here in Leicester, and I'm guessing it is down your way. It's always blue skies all the time in Cornwall, is it? It never rains down there.
Yeah, it's actually boiling hot. It's a bit too hot here. No, it's not. It's the sun is making an appearance between a few clouds. I got off the train and went straight for a swim nearby, near my house on the river near the Carrick Roads in between Truro and Falmouth. And the sun was coming out. The water was silky, smooth and beautiful. Just had a quick 10-15 minute dip, but it was pretty special.
Well, actually, I'm going to ask you a question now, but I think I already know the answer. But do you swim and surf all year round, or is there a cut-off point, or are you just 365 days a year?
Yes, well, look, if it's all year round. I'd love to actually surf 365 days of the year, but I probably get to surf about half of that, if I'm lucky, because of a busy sort of work schedule that often will take me away from waves too. But yeah, surf all year round, swim all year round, used to see as much as I can. So I ride waves on the north on the north coast, on the south coast, in all parts of the county and other parts of the country. I swim sort of longer swims in my wetsuit and swim in my shorts a lot over the summer and the autumn and the sort of shoals of the season. Sort of just explore the coastline in various ways, and ride various craft, which is probably part of what's quite a big movement now, the sort of the fringe surfing movement, not just surfing pointy shortboards, but surfing all sorts of things depending on the waves.
Magic, amazing. So you've just got back from the Blue Earth Summit. Tell me a little bit about that. How did it go? What was it like?
Yeah, well, look, it was first of all, it's so nice to see the world opening up a bit more and live events happening without too much anxiety or too much protocol around them in terms of the pandemic that we're all, we've all been subject to the last couple of years. So it was really nice to see people. It was a very friendly audience, people that we know very well by and large. So it was a familiar audience, and it reminded me a lot of an event that we did a couple of years ago, called the Global Wave Conference. So it was nice. I gave a keynote speech, and seemed to go down well. I always sort of think people, let other people who listen to it judge it, rather than myself. But it's good to communicate what we're doing, and really my job is to talk about the sort of bigger sort of issues and the way we build movements and need to build movements to try and change the systems that we're all living in at the moment that are causing so much damage.
Yeah. When you come back from these events, when you're there, do you get a feel that the needle is moving? Do you feel that there's positive change happening? Does it give you encouragement that there's other things going on? How do you feel when you're kind of at these events? Is it encouraging?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's always a lot of inspiration. There's creative inspiration. There's inspiration about the things people are doing to try and be more sustainable or protect the planet. So I do feel inspired to have fantastic conversations with people, and we're a charity about people and planet, and where people engage with the planet, particularly through surfing and using the sea. We're more than surfers, people who swim, people who sail, people who kayak, people who, the rivers or ocean, wherever they may be, people who love the ocean, wherever they may be, and want to take action. So I feel inspired by the stories that people tell me, the stories of business and sustainability, the stories of the issues they want to fight for, to protect the planet, to protect people, to restore the planet, because we're in a really crucial age. I think we're in the environmental decade. So these things are a part of it. I think it's important as well to recognize that the events are a place that we talk about action and we inspire people, but the real results of that is what happens on the ground, and where people really are committed to delivering, what they talk about. And that's something that I hope that we do at Surfers Against Sewage. We don't just walk the walk that we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk as well. And that's so important now, and that's what people will be thinking about as we move towards COP26. That there'll be a lot of chest beating, there'll be a lot of rhetoric, there'll be a lot of big speeches and commitments, but really it won't be the first week and second week of November in Glasgow that will make the difference. It will be all of the actions that truly are taken after Glasgow that make the difference to the sort of future we can have on this fragile blue planet that we live on. So it does inspire me to see people and hear different things and see different tactics. I've just also come back from not just the Blue Earth Summit, but I was up at a big TED event in Edinburgh, and I got to talk on a sort of an ocean panel there with some brilliant people. But there are some sort of disruptive things to it. There was I was watching some of the speeches, and there was a panel with representatives from the oil industry, the CEO of Shell, and some activists, and the activists really laid into the man, rightfully so, about some of their lack of commitment, lack of action, and their actual sort of greenwashing and lies. And they staged a walkout, banners, normal stuff, and I walked out with them. I thought, we can't be inviting the most damaging industry onto stage to try and make their excuses. We need to keep the pressure up. We need really rapid change and a really well-planned transition away from fossil fuels, and we need to end fossil fuels as soon as possible. We know that it can't happen tomorrow, but we do need a much better and more ambitious plan to get to the world that will be just and equitable for everyone, not just the wealthiest people in the most developed nations, but the wealthiest people, including most of probably the people who listen to this podcast, will need to use their privilege to be able to champion what needs to happen and why it needs to happen for everyone, not just for the few.
Yeah, totally agree. It's amazing that you talked about the planned transition, because actually a lot of my questions are based around that to you, and it's a lot about the roadmap. So just to go back a couple of stages, I got led onto Surfers Against Sewage about a year ago, and then obviously onto you. Firstly, massive tip of my hat to you and the work that you do. In my small world here in Leicester, in my small community, plastic pollution is a big thing to us, in terms of something that we're really working hard to try and improve it in our own little world. But in the work that we do and the messages that we're putting out there and the work that we do with our clients, we're trying to contribute and try and do some good, positive things. And for my own opinion at the moment is like, we're bombarded every day with big global challenges from health, politics, and the environment. And it feels for me, and I'm sure this is different for you, well, I don't know if it is different from you, but sewage pollution, marine wildlife, and eliminating plastic pollution, it just seems really low down on the agenda compared to other things. And the question, I suppose, is how do we get more people talking about it, and how do we have more meaningful conversations?
Let me just unpack that slightly. So it's far from the agenda. What do you think is on their agenda?
Well, I think in the last 18 months, COVID is dominated. I think people are talking about climate change, but if I just put a spotlight on part of that question, plastic pollution, it's surrounded us. You can't breathe with it. Single-use plastic, the way that people use plastic and waste plastic, just doesn't seem that it's on people's agendas to tackle that right now, and it's annoying. And that really isn't a question there. It's more of just a statement. But I suppose the question is, how do we move the needle on plastic pollution?
I think there's a few things here, and I think we are at a time that we need to see much more radical action on plastic pollution, on water quality issues, and we're seeing, of course, the massive climate and biodiversity and ecological crisis. I think we're communicating with a lot of people. We've come through the Blue Planet effect, reaching millions of people in households. There's organisations, including Surfers Against Sewage, but not exclusively us. Many brilliant organisations talking to the public about plastic pollution, about habitat loss, about things that they should do in their day-to-day life to make a difference. And I think there's a bit of a sort of a trick here that's happening that is an age-old sort of business trick, which is it's really about individual behavior. Things like when people talk about footprint, that came from the oil industry. They invented that to make it about individual responsibility. The plastics industry invented the sort of littering paradigm, and talked about pollution being driven by individuals, not corporations. And we're seeing the same from the water industry. They talk about solving their problems by public information campaigns of people not flushing period products or sanitary products down the toilet. Now, this is all to absolve them of responsibility. Now we can all play our part, and we can decide how we're going to protect the world in different ways on an individual basis. We can choose to change our diet. We can choose not to use plastics. We can choose not to flush the wrong things down the toilet. We can choose to do all sorts of things. But, ultimately, we're all trapped within a system. And what we really need to see now is the individual action that's needed most is us combining our voices to demand that the systems change. The economic system that's unjust, the energy system, which is still, fossil fuel subsidies from all nations, the plastic system, and we need to demand more. We need to really have the systems that can contain and control the plastic in this world and other pollutants, sewage and other things. We need to make sure that carbon emissions are stopped from source. Let's just take it from the pandemic, and you talked about the pandemic being the top of people's minds. Over 2020, we saw one of the biggest reductions in carbon dioxide that the world has ever seen, since the Industrial Revolution. So 7%. That's from everyone not traveling to see their friends and family, not going on holiday, not commuting to work. So you imagine 93% is the system that needs to be changed, because every individual action there is taken. So you've got to look at how much more needs to be done by the system that is controlling us. So it's really about us uniting our individual actions to demand change, because business would love it if we all, as the public, argued amongst ourselves about more people needing to take action and more people needing to do this, that, and the other. That's a small part of it. The big part of it is businesses and governments putting the societal playing field in place that is actually sustainable and circular and regenerative for the planet. Because unless they create that for us to live within, as it were, and to use for our day-to-day lives, we're going to be in big trouble. And we could look at the transport system. I mean, ultimately, we know in cities particularly, we've got to move away from the private motor vehicle. We've got to move towards proper, good public transport and roads or transport systems that are made for everyone, that are cheap and efficient, and roads that are reclaimed for people and nature, and where we get rid of the sort of emissions, both the plastic particulate from tires and the carbon dioxide from engines, into we've got to get rid of that, because we're in a dangerous time where people can be fooled into thinking that that we're just going to replace everything we have with something that is more environmental. And there's no better example than a electric car. It's a total fallacy that we're going to all just replace every single car out on our street with electric cars over the next 10, 15 years. That's not the solution. It's going to create the next ticking time bomb of environmental disaster, of all of the rare minerals that are needed for batteries, all of the resources that are needed to make those cars. And so we need to really think longer and harder about what a sustainable world looks like around us. Electric cars will be part of it, but not at the scale that we have motor vehicles individually at the moment.
No, that's really interesting. Like, we're replacing one bigger problem with a slightly, probably less smaller problem. And I suppose if we were to look at plastic waste, yeah, we can replace packaging, we can replace things, but it doesn't change consumption, it doesn't change health, and it doesn't change diet, and it doesn't change nutrition. So I see where you're seeing that, we've got to go back a few layers and look at what a sustainable life really looks like, and look at the start of this. You mentioned a lot about the system that you talked about, and amplifying your voice and be a collective voice to fight against the system that we all live in. So to take that, to go back onto that question, from a ground level and to the everyday person who believe really strongly about this, how can we, beyond our voice, start to think about how can we affect and change this system that we currently all live in? What's a good starting point?
Find communities. And we're seeing an incredible era, and it's not dissimilar to the 1990s when SAS started. The 1990s were this decade when people were rising up against unfair social situations, unfair taxes, unfair and damaging environmental practices. So we had the poll tax riots. There was the famous Swampy chaining himself to trees and burying himself underground to stop bypasses. We saw all sorts of things, and I'm old enough to remember that really vividly. And we saw Surfers Against Sewage rising up against sewage pollution. And that decade was a decade of actually sort of sweeping and rising legislation. It was a sort of a rising tide of good legislation, and also, you know, environmental legislation, and also sort of finance for regulators to operate properly. We're seeing the same sort of thing now. We're seeing like a really, really good decade of environmental movements and people rising up against things. The sort of social movement, people coming together on, you know, values-based and you know, really, really strong campaigns that can change the world for the better. Sadly, we've got a dropping tide of legislation and sort of enforcement and regulation at the moment. So, I mean, it's not just dropping tide, the tide's like the lowest it's ever been. And we seem to, you know, be calmly accepting it, you know, where governments are unable to and unwilling to tax the mega rich. They quickly came in to tax all of the hardworking people in this country to try and recoup the money spent during the pandemic. They've just taken away the lifeline of that £20 extra per week for the poorest in society. I mean, whilst the mega wealthy have got nothing but richer during the last 2 years by a staggering amount. In some cases, so much that they can build rockets to take themselves to the edge of outer space and be celebrated in the media. So we live in a really sort of crazy time where we need to think about, you know, coming together even more to demand the world that we want to see. And what I would say to anyone is, take your actions. Every action counts. So, you know, whether you're a beach cleaner and you're picking up plastic, whether you're deciding, you know, and whether you decide you want an electric car, because some electric cars will be part of it, whether you're changing your diet, whether you're doing, you know, a plastic-free, you know, year, whatever you do, these are good things. But really importantly, we've got to connect together at the right political moments to demand change. And that can be as sort of extreme as a general election, voting for, you know, a party that will really change policies and reform, you know, things in your eyes, through to things like the Environment Bill or COP26 or G7, when we can come together to demand change. Now, none of them are absolute, so it's always a sort of a process. So, you know, no doubt people will be disappointed after COP26. It won't quite realise everything they hoped. But what we need to do is keep pushing in the right direction, because I do think we're going to be in the most radical sort of environmental decade ever, and we should look about it sensibly. We should be thinking about what we want to see by 2030, not what we want to see by you know, 2030 tomorrow. Even it should be actually a realistic but reachable time frame, which, you know, in your life you go, right, by the end of this decade, you know, we'll see rivers running free of sewage pollution, we'll see bathing waters on rivers, we'll see much less single-use plastic on our beaches, we'll see proper action finally taken on climate change, we'll see the transition away from fossil fuels really understood and underway. And so all of those things, you know, can be things that within our near-term lifetime, if we come together and keep calling for them, they will happen. Whereas when people talk about net zero in 2050, people are like, I don't even really know whether I'll be alive in 2050. I don't know what the world will look like. It feels too far away. We need some short-term sort of goals and lines in the sand that can take us to a much better place. And 2030 is a perfect date for us to do that.
Magic. Awesome. Right, Hugo, I'm going to move on to my quick fire questions now.
Yeah.
I say they're quick fire. They normally give the longest answers, but they're normally the best answers.
Yeah.
I've been asking this question now since the beginning of the pandemic, and I love asking it. But what's the most important thing that you've learned in the last 18 months?
That's a really good question. I've learned a couple of things. I think I've learned a lot about resilience and what communities can do if they really come together. It's been a time that we've really had to listen to each other much more, because people have responded to the pandemic in different ways and are coming out of it in different ways. And so we really need to understand each other much more. And I've learned most of all how important human connections are. And whilst I'm speaking to you on Zoom, which is all good, actually proper human connections are face to face. where we can read each other and communicate in the sort of subtle, the nuanced ways that really help us build the right relationships. And so I think I've learned that the power of people and people coming together is so important for this world, and I probably learned a lot about SAS and how unique our organization is and how important it can be for this decade of creating change.
Yeah, I agree totally. Okay, next one. Your best teacher.
I'll just say what came to mind. A woman called Mrs. Hartridge, who was a teacher in my infant school. Can't actually really remember exactly what she taught me. She's a generalist, but I just remember her being very kind and very enthusiastic about all of the children in the class.
Okay, well, I'm going to flip that question then. Your best mentor.
My best mentor, that's a really good question. I've worked with and for some brilliant people in my time. Sarah Brown, Gordon Brown's wife, was a great mentor to me. Another boss, Dr. Ashok Sinha from the Climate Coalition, who now runs this London cycling campaign. Brilliant person. Often with mentors, I think they might not even know how much they do for you because you just watch and absorb. You don't necessarily actually get told or instructed, and then you just watch how people operate and you learn a lot from them. Yeah, I probably sort of cite those two, most of all, and the ocean.
Love it. Yeah, I love it. Okay, just the third one then. Your toughest decision.
My toughest decision. But I think I'm not sure decisions I find tough. I think decisions are always like liberating because it's not making a decision that's tough. It's not being clear that's tough. So I think it's the things that have worried me are things where I haven't made a decision yet. So I'm not sure I ever find the decisions tough. I think it's more the lack of decision sometimes, and where I haven't yet made a decision that it's more difficult. If that's not too much of a sitting on the fence.
No, I like it. That's cool. Cool. Well, the name of the show is called Brandmaster Flash, and the main subject area of the podcast is about brand building. But let me refine brand and what brand means to me. So for me, brand and brand building, it's creating an identity that fits within a perceived space. So when I talk about identity, it's not just about visual, it's the language that we speak, it's the message that we give. The space is often the category of the work that we work in. And I truly believe that when that brand fills that space, you can build a community, and you can build a community that can do great things. And that's where enlightened brand strategy comes from. The tagline of the show, that I'm looking to work with brands and help brands or listen to brands that are creating an identity in a perceived space, but actually growing towards positive change and growth. And that's everything that like you stand for, about positive change and growth. And I think now it's important that brands have this true mindset, and not just a corporate social responsibility that's bolted onto the back of a business. I'm talking about it actually being from the heart and being true, the main truth of what brands are and want to be. But this is reality now. How do we encourage brands to be truer and to really connect with the important things that are happening right now? Because as businesses have to play a huge responsibility in this. And I know that's a big audacious question there, but how do they start changing mindset? Where do they start?
Well, look, I think they have to, we all have to think about the values of the business we run or we work for. I'd encourage any business to think about that. And, to your point of sort of bolt-ons. I mean, people don't want bolt-ons, and I think particularly with the rising generation, moving into the jobs market, or early on in their careers, they want much more from the place they work. They want to work in places that care, that care about the world, that care about other people, that care about them as employees, that recognize their needs, that care about diversity and inclusion. And so the new sort of workforce wants and needs much more, and that's good. It pushes all businesses to do better. I think companies need to be aware of what they're saying and what they're doing, and how that needs to connect, because many can come out with marketing campaigns and statements about what they want to do on ethical and environmental issues, and they don't actually match up with the actions they take or the products they make. And where there's a disconnect, it's going to create a real challenge for their culture internally and externally. And we see that with fast fashion brands that try and make a play for the ethical, sustainable sort of space. We see it, as I did at the TED lectures, where oil companies try and say that they're doing loads for the environment, but yet are contesting, lawsuits that say they've got to reduce their carbon emissions. These things, if it doesn't add up, you'll be found out. So you've got to make sure that your words and actions actually match, and that you're doing everything you can to live up to your statements. And I would probably say, from our perspective, the brand should think about where they really want to be and position themselves in the market, and how big they really want to be. I think we've got a fixation on sort of growth in our economy is based around growth, of course, and everything then cascades down from that. So without perpetual growth, no one's sort of happy and don't feel they're doing well. And I wonder whether brands are good at a small size that can actually be in control of the things in their sort of value chain that they really care about, and actually stay sustainable, because big doesn't necessarily mean better. Big doesn't necessarily mean you retain control. And we often see the story of brands going wrong as they try and scale, and losing their values and losing their direction, and losing their focus, and drifting into other areas they were never designed to be in, and letting their core customer base down. And normally that's just in the pursuit of money. That's in the pursuit of founders going, we just want to get bigger, get the venture capitalists in, and go further and faster. And maybe as small brands like Howie's decided to do, who sold to Timberland and then bought it back to keep a company that not to grow ambitiously, just to keep its employees happy, doing good jobs, making good clothes, and keeping on moving. And people should really think about that sort of whole dynamic, because you really have one life, and you can eternally chase this next bit of growth, but ultimately you can never grow time back.
That's so true. And that's the thing with most organizations, is this drive for economic growth, because most businesses feel if we're not growing financially and the line's going up, then ultimately we're failing, and they could collapse and go under, which we know is not the truth. You need to look at other brands like Howie's, Patagonia, that they show that you don't have to be like that, and you can have growth, but you can grow in other ways, being purpose driven, looking at sustainability, and being the front runner, and not just doing it because you think, oh, we can make money out of this. Although purpose driven brands can be profitable, but actually it's a change in mindset. And I think if we can have braver leaders, braver founders, braver CEOs who can lead the way and go, there is a different way here. And ultimately, whether it's economically bad or it financially, I'm not saying it should be financial murder, but it financially is going to be rocky, but long term, it's the right thing to do. And I suppose then it's like, how do we then lead leaders, or educate leaders, or help leaders be braver and know that there is another way? And that's the challenge here, isn't it? I don't know how we can do that. And I suppose I'm going to flip that question. Who do you know in your communities now? Who's leading the way? Who's really doing great things? They're a business, they're they're a business and they're doing amazing things. Who can we put a spotlight and talk about here?
Yeah, look, I mean, I would always reference my friend across the road, Tom Kay, who runs Finisterre, a brand that's had people and planet at its heart since its inception, and has grown much bigger, but has really kept those values and that culture right at its heart, and is very authentic, and it's best they do their best to reduce their impact. So yeah, they're good. Who else do I think are good in the spaces? Well, there's all sorts of sort of upstarts in the environmental sort of or sustainable sort of product line, and I think there's many who sort of innovate from the very small and actually sort of are trying to really trying to start something that they can sell on, that often will lose those values along the way, but I think you'd always look at the sort of North Stars of Patagonia, of Finisterre, a Howie's for things of how you can do well in the keeping values right close to the center of your business. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm currently reading the book from Yvonne Chouinard, is it Let Them Go Surfing? I can't remember the title. It's just amazing. And, from day one, because he was a climber, he surfed, he was truly connected with the environment and the sports that he did. And it was just lived and breathed through the climbing gear and then obviously into then the fashion. And I suppose, that he's created this blueprint of how you can do it. And obviously that works in his business, his sector. Then you've got hundreds and thousands of different types of businesses and sectors that have these business models that are built on unsustainable practice, unsustainable materials. And I suppose for them to change, it's like a big oil tanker, turning round, pardon the pun. But I suppose what we need to look at is the businesses that are doing it and their methodology and their systems, and look at the blueprint and then try and cleverly, intelligently fund businesses so they can look at new sustainable business models. I know I've seen on LinkedIn now that there's more people trying to be like sustainable consultants to try and go into businesses and say, look, we've got to change these things. And I suppose we need to amplify that more. We need to go into these big corporations and look at everything that they're doing and say, there's got to be another way here, and it's not going to be a cheaper way. We have to be very clear about that. It is going to be expensive to change this, but long term, it is worth it. It's got to be done.
And look, I agree. I think there's sort of a few things. I mean, unless people are really sort of well sort of trained and sort of educated in the right sort of as it were, supply chain, materials, sort of understandings, it can be hard to really understand some of those the big business sort of decisions. I mean, what I'd probably say is that think about where everything comes from. Try and if you can buy things that supports a smaller supply chain from local people, whatever, whether it's some food, whether it's restaurants that source locally, whether it's clothing that's made closer to home, Portugal instead of China, those things can be really good. So think about those things. I would also say we're in a time when society has to be remodeled. Well, I mean, it has to happen because we're very close to some dangerous tipping points if we don't. But what I don't hear people talking about very much is the culture and the expectation that we're going to have less in the future. And we need to have less, and we need to consume less because we have a junk economy. And it's not just junk food. It's not just junk plastic. There's just junk everywhere. We're all marketed junk all day long that keeps this booming economy growing all the time. You know, stupid products that the world doesn't need, stupid things that you keep for seconds and then end up in the charity shop or in a tip. You know, we have just junk everywhere in our lives that is pushed on us. Yet we have a society that's less and less happy. We have a mental health crisis. We have people struggling for time. We have people not having enough time with their friends and family. We have a junk digital economy too. We have people scrolling endlessly through junk content of memes of cats and hedgehogs doing stupid things on their phones, wasting electricity, wasting server space. And actually what we need to start doing is going, look, we're probably going towards a time when the richest countries, the most developed economies, need to start going, look, we're going to consume less, because it's a fallacy that the whole world is going to rise up to this, you know, this sort of this level where everyone's got lives like we've got at the moment, or better than we've got at the moment, with everything being sustainable and fully good for the planet. But we can live better lives with less. But you know what we can gain back from that is have more time. We can have more time with our friends and family. We could have more time outdoors. We could have more time creating experiences with people. And that's really, I think, some of the stuff we've lost over the years, that we live such fast-paced lives where we're expected to consume fast. And, you know, we're often described as people, as consumers now by you know, all of these businesses. And actually, you know, we shouldn't be seen as just consumers. We're, you know, everyone is an individual, a person with feelings and with needs to cover. But we you know, we should be accepting that what we consume and how we do it at the moment is not right. And we've just come through what I would describe as a dress rehearsal for all of this, which is the pandemic. And I think if I said to you 2 years ago that overnight politicians could pass laws that would mean that you couldn't go and see your friends or family, or you wouldn't be able to go to work, you wouldn't be able to go to the pub, you'd have to stay at home, you'd have to stay indoors, you'd have laughed at me and said that will never happen. And I think we've got to accept that the government probably needs to be more ambitious on the things that should or shouldn't happen in business too, because it can see quite clearly what is damaging the world: the proliferation of single-use plastics, the subsidies and fossil fuel companies, water companies extracting huge profits whilst they destroy our rivers, you know, which they may claim will take 250 billion or whatever they claim to prevent their sewage pollution, but our rivers are worth much more than 250 billion quid to this time now, to us and to our future in this country. So I think we've got to remodel things, and we've got to see much more ambitious legislation, policy, laws holding business to account. You know, I think we're ready to go. I think people go, look, if there's an emergency, if we're losing this world that supports us, I think people go, look, of course I'm not gonna, you know, who needs Kinder Egg toys anymore? Who needs X, Y, and Z that's in the junk economy? We've got to get rid of the junk economy. It's not healthy. It doesn't matter if it's growing. You know, you wouldn't be proud of growing your kid on junk food. You want to give your kid good food. So let's get rid of the junk economy.
Totally agree. In terms of creativity and messaging, then, how do we kind of educate? It all starts with education. It starts with putting a spotlight in this. How do we start using creativity to get people thinking about what is happening right now? I know that you work with Enviral, and obviously they're playing a huge part in amplification of messaging and connecting with people. But from a creative point of view, what have you seen that you think, wow, that is a brilliant idea and we should do more of that?
Look, I think there's all sorts of amazing creativity, and I'm sort of an oldish man now, so it tends not to sort of come from sort of my peers. It comes from young people like the great team at Enviral and other sort of agencies and companies, and people come up with great content, and we've got amazing platforms to share it on. But I think ultimately, I'm much more interested in change happening from, you know, it's not just about education, and there's often a moot point, which is education is a get out clause for the current generation. So let's educate the kids to make sure that they can clean up the mess after we've all gone. We've sort of fucked up the planet. Let's give them the tools not to not fuck it up and also restore it. I think that the really key now is that education is a proxy for individual behavior change. And actually what we need to see is business and government behavior change. Now, we desperately need the things that are killing the planet to stop, for polluting businesses to be held to account and to be put out of business. We need to see a radical reshaping of and retooling of our world. What we've got to see now is, on the really hopeful note, is that this green revolution, this transition to renewable energy, to a different way of being, is probably one of the biggest economic opportunities that the world has ever seen. Just, it's going to be very different from what we've got now. And so the world needs to be ambitious. We need to seize this opportunity. We need to go further, faster, and in a bigger way to do that. And people shouldn't see this as a negative. You know, this will create jobs, it will support people, it will protect nature, and that's what we now need to do on this amazing place that we live, called Earth.
Amazing. Okay, cool. I'm mindful of time, so I'm gonna wrap this up with one last subject here, and I think this could be really important. So the businesses and brands that listen to this show, one of the things that you've got on the Surfers Against Sewage website is the plastic-free community and how you can support a plastic-free community. Yeah. What I'd quite like to do here is look at businesses and how they can create a plastic-free community in their workplace and the things that they do. So talk me through a couple of the steps that they could start thinking about doing and exercising to have a kind of a plastic-free community at work.
Yeah. Well, I'm so proud of the plastic-free community leaders, and they're doing so much more than we ever, help them sort of do. So we've got people doing just such brilliant initiatives around the country. But the principle sort of guiding 5 steps of it were sort of quite simple and straightforward. And when we devised this in 2016, we'd sort of copied, really, in a way, the transition towns and fair trade towns sort of models of different things that community leaders could do to work with business and bring people together and run events to message people and take action. And there was nothing like this in the plastic space, and so we designed it, and it went down really well. I thought, when we launched it, I thought, well, if we could get 125 communities by 2020, that would be great. And we've got 850 now, representing millions of people around the country, sort of theoretically. And a business can get involved, and they can actually take a step and just come to our plastic-free website and sign up as an individual business. And it just means that they need to start reducing their plastic footprint, get rid of, if you're a cafe, you could get rid of 3 items, your sachets of ketchup, your plastic, forks and knives, cutlery, and you might want to do away with, some have gone extreme and done away with things like, coffee cups and gone for a pretty reusable sort of circular way. So you can come in and just be part of it. I mean, I think the great thing is once you're part of a community, you've got a sort of a peer group around you, people who think the same, who are trying to do the same thing, and it becomes more than just plastics. It's about your whole footprint as a society, as a local sort of community, but also how you support each other and how you bring stuff back to your local sort of area. And think about the values-based stuff that we're talking about, how you connect, support each other, and create a better world.
Yeah, 100%. I'd be quite interested to see what businesses can do. I like the idea that they're supporting each other, encouraging each other, coming up with imaginative, creative ways to help them, because it leads on to other things like exercise, health, other things that they can do to contribute. But so many people that I talk to still don't know about these things, or if they don't know about it, they don't care about it. But it only takes 1 or 2 people in a business to say, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm going to do. Even if they don't if the other people don't contribute, they can see it, they can feel it, they can see what's going on. And just one person in a business can make a big change. So in terms of any of the businesses or brands that are listening to this and interested in getting involved, where shall we send them? What should they go to your website? Where would you like to send the?
Look, just come to sas.org.uk and the journey can start there. There's lots of things. You can join a beach clean, you can become a citizen scientist, you could, start a plastic-free community, you could join a plastic-free community, you could become a member, you could meet up with your local regional rep at a local event, you could sign up for water quality alerts at your favorite beaches, and then join a digital campaign to pressurize water companies, CEOs and local MPs to take more action. There's so many things people can do, something for everyone. And we're an open, inclusive, diverse charity. We're more than surfers, work on more than sewage, and there's something for everyone to get involved with.
Wicked. Hugo, again, I just want to tip my cap to you in the work that you do. It's so important, the things that you're doing, and it's so needed. And I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for talking about these things on the show. And I'd love to catch up with you again, maybe in the new year, and we'll go further and talk about more stuff.
Yeah, well, look, thank you so much for having me. Real pleasure to talk to you. And thanks to everyone for listening. And definitely we'll do something in the new year.
Nice one. Cheers. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Afterwards, I felt really different about my own contribution to the cause. What am I doing in my life that I can reduce some of the things that damage the environment or damage the seas or contribute to plastic pollution or sewage pollution? I've started thinking about how my business can support this cause and be better. And it's also made me really think about what can I do to amplify Hugo's message or Surfers Against Sewage message, or just the message for marine conservation and protection. So it's something that I'm going to work harder to be better. And I'm also going to try and do more work within Brandmaster Flash and with my agency, just to try and help and really tackle this important subject. If you want to know more about Hugo and the work that he does at Surfers Against Sewage, then I'm going to leave his details and the organisation's details in the show notes. I'll leave it in the comments with the video on the platform that you're watching this, and then you can get in contact and see where you can help and be part of this really important cause. But as always, be useful, be kind, and I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.